Have you ever noticed how people start shifting around you the moment you begin to evolve? They don't say it out loud, but you'll feel it in the sudden tension behind their laughter, in the way your growth is met not with support, but subtle discomfort. They offer advice you didn't ask for. They crack jokes that sting a little too much. Or worse, say nothing at all when you speak from a deeper place. What's really happening? You're confronting their comfort without meaning to. Your change is a mirror. And most people aren't ready to see what's staring back, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your self-awareness silently calls out their complacency. And maybe, just maybe, you're in that phase right now. You've started asking questions that don't have neat answers. You've begun rejecting the roles and rules you once obeyed without thought. And now, you feel alone, judged, misunderstood. But here's the truth no one tells you, because most are too afraid to admit it. This is the cost of transformation, not surface-level change, not performative self-help, but real, irreversible psychological evolution, the kind of change that doesn't just shift how you think, but shatters the identity you were handed and forces you to build your own. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this, not as a philosopher on a podium, but as a man who walked through solitude with his eyes open. He warned us, when you begin to think for yourself, to rewrite your values, to abandon the illusions that made you digestible to others, you become dangerous. Not violently, not outwardly, but symbolically. You threaten the status quo simply by no longer needing it, because the strongest mind doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need validation. Its strength is its silence, unbending, unbroken, and unmanipulated. That kind of mind scares people. Why? Because it reminds them of their own cages. It reveals without trying what others refuse to see in themselves. But here's where you come in. If you're watching this, it's probably because something inside you is shifting. You're tired of shrinking, tired of explaining, tired of being edited just to make others comfortable. And more than anything, you're ready, not for a motivational quote, not for an easy fix, but for a path that demands everything and gives back something no one can take: sovereignty over your own mind. This video is not for the agreeable. It's not for the crowd pleasers. It's a signal for those on the edge of rupture, who are ready to rebuild from the ruins. So if that's you, stay. What comes next might unsettle you. But once you see the truth behind the roles, the masks, and the noise, there's no going back. And maybe that's the point. Nietzsche was not just a philosopher. He was a surgeon of the human soul. Someone who didn't flinch at the grotesque complexity of human existence. He had the audacity to look directly into the abyss, not as a tourist of suffering, but as a diver, plunging into the chaos most people spend their entire lives avoiding. And it was in that very chaos, that raw and disordered space within the psyche, that Nietzsche discovered the seed of true power. Because for him, transformation never came through harmony or stability. It was not order that awakened the self. It was pain. It was collapse. It was chaos itself. He once wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." This was not some poetic flourish. It was a psychological autopsy of human evolution. It was a diagnosis of what it means to become someone unrecognizably stronger than you were. If you truly want to forge a mind that cannot be shaken, you must abandon the naive belief that it will emerge through ease. You will not build anything unbreakable while bathing in comfort, repeating affirmations, or chasing cheap doses of dopamine disguised as motivation. Number the mind you seek. Solid, sharp, defiant, will only be sculpted in the fire. It begins when you stop asking the universe to be gentler and start demanding that you be forged strong enough to bear its weight. Think about it. When have you grown the most? When everything was soft and predictable? Or when the world collapsed around you? When you were shattered, discarded, humiliated, and had to claw your way back to life with nothing but your will and your mind? Nietzsche never viewed suffering as a flaw in the human condition. He saw it as the mechanism through which life carves depth. He didn't glamorize agony. He weaponized it. He believed that if you could stop recoiling from discomfort, if you could learn to stand still in the middle of your own devastation, without looking for someone to rescue you, then you could begin shaping something rare, something terrifying, something untouchable. And it is in that very becoming that the world begins to shift in your presence, because while others search for safety, you will walk calmly through fire. While they ask for permission, you will write your own law. While they beg for normalcy, you will birth your own myth. But this transformation demands a violent rupture from what you've been taught about strength. Strength is not pretending to be okay. It's not masking pain with politeness or faking emotional control to appear together. Strength is surviving what should have destroyed you without letting it make you small. Strength is standing in the aftermath of your own undoing and choosing still to rise with fire in your chest. And yet, Nietzsche was clear. Chaos alone is not enough. Without an inner core, without a guiding principle that anchors you, that same chaos can consume you. You can drown in the very thing meant to awaken you, which brings us to one of the most radical moments in all of Nietzsche's thought. The moment he declared God dead, not to be provocative, but to deliver the most jarring truth of all, that there is no longer a sky to look up to, no longer a script to follow, no longer an authority to blame. And with that, he placed upon you the full burden and gift of existential responsibility. You become the creator now, the architect, the one who must birth meaning in a world that no longer hands it to you. And it is only from that terrifying freedom that the most authentic strength is born. If this resonates, if somewhere deep inside you feel the stirrings of something dangerous waking up, click the subscribe button and join us. This path is not for everyone, but for those ready to walk through the chaos and build something eternal. Welcome. You're exactly where you need to be. When Nietzsche declared, "God is dead," he wasn't rejoicing. He wasn't dancing in the ashes of belief or mocking the faithful. He was issuing a warning, one so profound, so unsettling, that even today, most still don't truly grasp its weight. He didn't kill a divine being. What he killed was the illusion that there's someone watching over you, that somewhere behind the chaos, there's a higher authority pulling the strings, a script, a purpose, a celestial reassurance that everything will eventually make sense. But Nietzsche tore that safety net apart. He ended the storybook comfort that tells you suffering is part of a divine test, that there's a cosmic plan, that someone, somewhere, has a reason for your pain. And in its place, he gave you a mirror, one that reflects only this, you. Because in the absence of God, there is no one left to blame, no one to follow, no higher meaning handed to you from above. And that's what terrifies people. Until that moment, it was easy to outsource responsibility, easy to believe that every loss, every heartbreak, every failure had a grander explanation. But now, you stand alone, not metaphorically, existentially. You are the source, you are the cause, you are the answer. There is no manual, no final judgment, no divine plan to justify your inaction. And it's here, at this precise moment of radical nakedness, that the construction of a truly powerful mind begins. Because most people, they collapse under the weight of that realization. They search for substitutes, ideologies, tribes, dogmas, anything to avoid facing their own freedom. But those rare few who do not crumble, they begin to forge something unshakable, something dangerous, with the death of God. Nietzsche does not leave you empty. He shoves you into the abyss of your own untapped potential. You are not told what is right. You must decide. You are not handed a purpose. You must create it. This is the birth of brutal autonomy. The moment where excuses die and responsibility becomes sacred. From this point on, everything depends on you. There is no savior. There is no rescue. Either you build yourself or you vanish into the noise. But here lies the paradox. The the very thing that terrifies you, that bottomless freedom, is also the deepest source of your power. When you finally realize that no one is coming to save you, something ancient wakes up inside you. A fire, a will, a force that does not ask for instruction or approval, one that bleeds but stands, that doubts but moves forward anyway. You begin to think not with borrowed beliefs, but with sovereign thought. You begin to feel not as you were taught to feel, but as your truth commands. You act, not out of fear, not out of guilt, but because your internal compass points there. And it's here, once all the illusions are shattered, once you've burned every mask, that Nietzsche lays the foundation for something even greater, a higher mode of being, a transformation not just of thought, but of the entire self. He speaks of a new type of human, one who does not belong to the herd, one who is not shackled by convention or crushed by moral guilt, a person who creates their own values, their own meaning, their own world, a being that does not ask to exist, but chooses to, that does not submit, but rises, that does not follow, but leads. And in doing so, they become a threat, not because they harm others, but because their very existence unmasks the weakness in those who never dared to evolve. This being has a name. Nietzsche called it the Übermensch, the overman, not a superior race, not a tyrant, but a liberated human who has overcome themselves, who has risen above the pettiness of societal expectations and now lives governed only by one law, the will to power. And if you want to build a mind so powerful that no one, no system, no person, no event can break it, then you must understand what it takes to become this figure, not in fantasy, but in reality, in thought, in action, in pain, in discipline. Let's dive into that now. Nietzsche did not believe in slow passive progress. He didn't place his hope in the soft hands of gradual reform or polite change. He believed in rupture, in chaos, in destruction, not for the sake of anarchy, but for the sake of rebirth. That's why he conceived the Übermensch, the overman. But let's be clear, this is not a mythic hero, not a god in disguise, not a caped figure with powers. The Übermensch is a human being stripped of illusions, a being who has annihilated every lie that keeps the ordinary mind small. Guilt, blind obedience, the desperate need for approval, the fear of rejection, the shallow morality of the herd. The Übermensch does not ask to be accepted. He does not soften his truth to be more palatable. He does not bend to be tolerated. He creates himself, by himself, and for himself. He writes his own laws internally and lives by them, even if those laws put him in opposition to everything the world deems sacred. That is precisely why his mind cannot be broken, because it does not lean on the approval of others. It does not crack under criticism. It is not stitched together with public opinion. It is whole. It is sovereign. It feeds on a single force, the will to power, that inner fire, that raw impulse to not just survive, but to shape reality, to shape values, to shape self. The Übermensch does not ask, will they approve? He does not wonder, is this normal? Instead, he asks only one question, is this worthy of me? And that single shift in perspective changes everything, because the moment you stop seeing yourself as a servant to the world and begin seeing yourself as its architect, your entire inner world begins to transform. You no longer live to please, you live to create. You no longer shrink to fit, you expand to express. But, and this is the part that most people will never tell you, becoming this kind of being requires sacrifice, immense sacrifice. You will have to sever the parts of yourself that still seek applause. You will have to bury the part of you that still aches to be accepted. You will have to endure the piercing loneliness of not belonging. You will have to walk away from the identities that were given to you and build a new one, brick by brick, with no guide, no guarantees, and no cheers from the crowd. And this is where most turn back. This is where they abandon the path, retreating to the warm familiarity of beliefs they didn't choose, moral codes they never questioned, and lives shaped by someone else's hands. The path to the Übermensch is not paved, it is carved, through solitude, through pain, through exile. Nietzsche understood this deeply because he lived it. He walked through life misunderstood, dismissed, mocked, and ultimately exiled from the very world he sought to awaken. But it was in that exile that he discovered his freedom, his power, his truth. And this is what you need to understand now. The more your mind grows, the more alone you will feel. The stronger you become, the more uncomfortable your presence becomes for others. Not because you're wrong, but because you've stopped playing the game. The construction of the Übermensch is not a self-help fantasy. It is a psychological crucifixion, followed by a resurrection of the will. It demands that you tear down every part of yourself that was built to please a sick culture. It asks you to stand in the ruins and not look for rescue, but to begin building, not with applause, not with support, but in silence, in solitude, in a deep, echoing stillness that separates the unshakable from the ordinary. Because real transformation, true, irreversible evolution, does not happen in crowds. It happens when you are alone, face to face with your own chaos, and still choose to rise. That is why, in the next part, we will explore one of the most neglected, misunderstood, and most essential aspects of this entire journey, the solitude of the strong. Because no mind becomes unbreakable without first learning to stand completely alone. And the real question is, are you ready? If there's one thing no one tells you about the path to mental strength, it's this. The stronger you become, the more alone you'll feel. Not because you're withdrawing from the world, but because the world starts to withdraw from you. The stronger your mind grows, the more your presence unsettles. People stop knowing how to engage with you. Conversations grow hollow. Interactions become strained. And slowly, without you trying to leave, you start to realize you no longer belong where you once felt safe. Nietzsche spoke directly to this. He called it the path of the free spirit, the individual who breaks from herd morality, who refuses easy answers, who thinks for themselves no matter the cost. And that path, it doesn't come with comfort. It comes with distance. And yes, it hurts. That distance aches, because as human beings we're wired to belong. We're taught to measure our worth by how well we fit in, how often we're validated, how accepted we are. But Nietzsche rips that entire structure apart. He says, growth requires space. You cannot expand in the confines of someone else's expectations. You cannot awaken while still playing a role written by others. And so, the herd must be left behind. The invisible walls of groupthink must be broken. Most people never even notice they're in a herd because it feels like safety. They've built their lives inside a collective comfort zone where every opinion is echoed, every action judged, every rebellion quietly punished. And then one day, you start to question. And suddenly, you're not in sync anymore. You feel that pull, the gravitational force of the crowd weakening. And what Nietzsche offers you in that moment is not reassurance, it's exile. He throws you into the psychological desert, a place with no applause, no praise, no hand to hold. Just you, your doubt, your pain, your past, your instinct to run back. And this, right here, is where the test begins, because most people do run back. They put the mask back on. They pretend they never felt it, that they never saw the cracks, that they're still happy being small. But you, if you want to become someone no one can break, you will have to stay. Stay in that silence. Stay in that isolation long enough to hear the truth echoing inside you. Nietzsche once said, "The individual must always struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." That's it. That's the whole journey, to own yourself. Because when you truly possess yourself, No one else can. No one gets to define your worth. No one gets to shatter your peace. No one gets to put a leash on your thoughts. But that kind of freedom comes at a cost. You will lose people. You will be misunderstood. You will hear whispers that you're arrogant, distant, strange. They'll try to pull you back. They'll call you cold, unfeeling, rebellious. They'll label what they cannot control. But that is the price of not being domesticated. That is the cost of refusing to live as a mirror for others' expectations, of no longer bending just to be loved. Because here's the raw truth. If you cannot stand loneliness, you are not ready for freedom. Because all real freedom comes with the death of the illusions that held you, of the comfort that dulled you, of the relationships that were only built on convenience. Freedom strips you. It leaves you exposed. And in that exposure, Nietzsche saw something sacred. He saw solitude not as punishment, but as a battlefield, a place where the false self dies and the real one is born. Because in that silence, you start to see what others don't. You stop reacting and begin observing. You stop chasing and begin building. You stop needing and begin becoming. But as your perception sharpens, as your mind rises above the fog of conformity, something else begins to happen. You start to feel it. Resistance, not from within, but from the outside. The collective begins to sense that you are no longer one of them. And they react, not because you've hurt them, but because your existence challenges theirs. And that brings us to the next inevitable part of this journey, the danger of collective mediocrity. Because the truth is, the world does not hunt those who blend in. It hunts those who dare to stand out. Shall we go deeper? Nietzsche did not fear tyrants. He did not tremble before kings, dictators, or visible oppressors. What stirred his fiercest warnings, what he denounced with burning philosophical clarity, was something far more subtle and insidious: collective mediocrity, that invisible net that wraps around society like fog. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't punish with chains, it binds with conformity. It's the quiet pressure to stay small, to blend in, to never rise so high that you disturb the people still sleeping. This is the true tyranny Nietzsche feared. Not the command of the few, but the consensus of the many. The downward pressure from the crowd that says, don't grow too much, don't think too deeply, don't become too different, because if you do, we'll feel like we have to change too. And you felt it, haven't you? The moment your voice became clearer, the moment your back straightened, the moment you stopped laughing at things that weren't funny and started asking questions no one wanted to answer. Something shifted. You didn't do anything wrong. You just started becoming real. And in doing so, you began to disturb people, not by attacking them, but by existing authentically. That's the danger of becoming sharp in a world that survives on dullness. You are the crack in the wall, the proof that something else is possible. And for the collective mind, that possibility is terrifying. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a system of inverted values created not from wisdom, but from resentment. Those who couldn't rise rewrote the rules so that rising itself became shameful. Strength was labeled arrogance. Ambition was called selfish. Independence became coldness. Excellence became pride. And by flipping virtue upside down, they created a moral framework where weakness is rewarded and power is punished. Not to protect the vulnerable, but to control the strong. Because they don't want to be saved, they want to be comfortable. And if your light makes their shadows too visible, they'll try to put it out. This is why the attacks come, sometimes direct, often subtle. The glance, the sarcasm, the exclusion, the silence in a room where your presence is too loud even when you don't speak. The message is always the same: go back. Don't remind us of what we could be. And you're not trying to do that. You're just breathing differently, but your difference is loud, even in silence. Nietzsche knew that most people live in quiet paralysis. Their lives shaped by fear disguised as morality, by obedience dressed up as virtue. And if you question that system, you are no longer a person to them. you are a problem. But here's the catch. Mediocrity doesn't attack with force. It attacks with numbers, with popularity, with repetition. It uses shame, exclusion, and doubt like weapons forged in the dark. And it's at that point, when everyone seems to look at you like you're broken, that most people give up. They cave, they shrink, they beg to be normal again, because being the strange one, the difficult one, the arrogant one, it's too much. But Nietzsche would give you a different name. Necessary, because this world does not change from within comfort. It does not evolve by consensus. It grows because one person dares to be the fracture in the system, and your fracture is where the light gets in. Your difference is not the threat, it is the spark, the irritation that provokes truth, the discomfort that creates movement. But you must understand this clearly. Being strong, thinking freely, living outside the herd, it is an act of war. A war not of violence, but of consciousness. A war against repetition, against submission, against the death of meaning. And like every war worth fighting, it demands preparation. You do not need armor for your body. You need weapons for your mind. You need tools that no one can take from you. Mental resilience, inner clarity, disciplined thought, boundless autonomy. These are not luxuries. They are necessities for a life that refuses to kneel. And that is exactly what we will explore next, in the final part of this journey. Because yes, there is a cost to building a mind so strong that it unsettles the world. There is loneliness, rejection, the loss of belonging, but there is also something else. There is a power that no one can strip from you. In the next part, we will face the truth, the price of being unbreakable, and the freedom that only the unbreakable will ever know. You made it this far, and that alone already sets you apart, because most people, they would have clicked away the moment the mirror cracked. They would have closed the tab the second their comfort was disturbed. They would have rejected this message, not because it's wrong, but because it's real. This is not content built to flatter your ego. It's a confrontation, a challenge, a call for those rare few who are ready to let go of the soft lies and face reality with their eyes wide open. Because building a mind so strong it becomes feared, so sharp it cannot be reshaped, is not a choice, it's a renunciation. You will lose relationships built on performance. You will lose opportunities that require your silence. You will lose the ability to fake joy in mediocrity. But what you gain is worth more than all of that combined. You gain integrity, the kind that can't be bought or borrowed. You gain clarity, the kind that sees through noise, through people, through false promises. You gain presence, the kind that walks into a room and shifts the air. You'll begin to notice how asleep most of the world is, how your awareness frightens them, how your firmness makes them doubt themselves, how even your absence echoes louder than the performance of 1,000 people. But understand this strength does not come from outside. It won't be found in bestsellers or hollow motivational slogans. It is carved out in the loneliness of hard nights, in the choices no one claps for, in the quiet moments when you could betray yourself, but don't. It is born in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. And this space, this battle, it never truly ends, because the truly strong are not those who reach a peak and rest. They are those who keep walking, even when they've earned the right to stop. Nietzsche never sought followers. He didn't want to be idolized. He wanted to provoke internal earthquakes. He wanted to tear you away from the addiction to approval, to wake you from the illusion of borrowed meaning, to strip you down until all that remained was something real. He didn't want to give you answers. He wanted to give you the courage to stop asking. He wanted to make you dangerous, not with fists, but with presence, not with aggression, but with depth. Dangerous in the rarest of ways, that your mere existence becomes a mirror that forces others to face what they've been avoiding, that your authenticity becomes a threat to every mask still worn by the world. And now, if this spoke to you, If something inside you stirred, then I want to invite you to do something that will make this real. Write in the comments a truth you've been hiding, a belief that makes you feel isolated, a thought you've been too afraid to say out loud. Say it now. Say it without apology. Not for validation, but for declaration. This is the next step. This is how you claim your voice. This is how you announce your presence, not just to the world, but to yourself. Because there's no turning back after this. Once you've seen, you cannot unsee. And once you've spoken your truth, you begin to live it. And if this video moved you, don't stop here. This was never meant to be a single message. It's a beginning. The next video is not a repeat. It is an evolution, a continuation of this path. And if you've come this far, you already know this isn't just curiosity pulling you forward. It's something deeper. A change has already begun. So keep going. Keep climbing. You are not lost. You are just ahead. And that is terrifying. But it is also the beginning of real freedom.